What's good, people? How y'all doing? Welcome to Movement Live at Home. Let me be one of the first, if not the first, to say to all my fathers out there, Happy Father's Day. I don't know if my brothers or even my father are watching this morning, but just to say Happy Father's Day to all of you, and just so grateful. Happy Father's Day to Waverly Sanders, which is my father, and happy Father's Day to Samir Malik, which is my mother's husband, who has been possibly at times more of a father than me in many ways. So just thank you so much to you two gentlemen, and just God bless you. But to all the men that have been fathers, all of my movement men, so grateful for you. And so grateful for the men that have been instrumental in my life and helping me, coaches and mentors that have been great to me. One of my best friends in the world, a guy named Eric Williams, has been huge blessing to me, and so grateful for that. So grateful to Happy Father's Day to Robert Williams, which is my father-in-law, and to Mark Campbell, also my father-in-law. So grateful for you two men as well, that you have thought enough of me to give me this privilege to be connected to your seed, going on 19 years. So just so grateful to you men. So if you guys are watching, Happy Father's Day to you as well. Man, it's exciting to be here, and it's weird because I started on this trajectory preparing a message because, usually Father's Day isn't nearly as big of a deal as Mother's Day is. And I could say that as one who loves his mother, I just have always made a much bigger deal there. And unfortunately, like many young men, too many African-American young men, we didn't grow up with our fathers in the home. And I know what that meant. And so my father wasn't there. And so that meant I gave a lot of credence to my mother and just how amazing she was, how strong she was, and how much she did to help raise me and my two brothers. And so that day just means a whole lot more. But when you are in the position I'm in, that I have a lot of young men in my life. I have 5, in some cases, I would say 6 boys in my life. I have sons, a bunch of sons, right? And so I can start with Stevenson, Steve-O, which isn't my biological son. In a lot of cases, he is like a little brother, but there are fatherly moments. And then there's Wubendi, who we took in, which is his brother. And me and my wife definitely consider him our son. And then there is DT, who is my son outside of my marriage, who came into my life a lot later, and was a huge surprise and something unexpected. And then there is CJ, there is Dalen, and then there is Caius, right? So that's 6 boys that I believe look up to me and are expecting to see a certain type of man and to live in a certain type of way. And so that brings a whole new perspective to this idea of Father's Day for me. Not to mention that I have my only one daughter, and that my hopes are to be a good father to her to such a degree that she ends up finding, all right, or no, let me put it this way, a great man finds her. And so my goal is to raise her and to love her and to care for her in a way that she knows what that means. And so the responsibility in my mind is huge. It's great. It's really great. And so I didn't plan to go that direction. I had started and I had like 4 pages of notes going in a particular way. And last night in the shower, I'm reading back over the passage, and right there in this passage, Matthew chapter 17, even as we're still talking, Jesus is King, there's a message for fathers right there. And it's weird because the couple of days before that, I was watching this Netflix documentary on this guy named Clarence Avant. And they call him the Black Godfather. And so this is this story about this guy, and he's somewhat mysterious. He was an American music executive. He was a producer, an entrepreneur, a film producer, a connector. He was a problem solver. He was a deal maker, and he knew everyone. The amazing thing about Clarence Avant was it wasn't about who he knew. It was more about who knew him. And everybody knew who this guy was. He had helped so many people, from Don Cornelius to Puff Daddy, right? He is working and moving all through this, right? And he is impressive to so many people. We learned that Clarence Avant is the person everybody wanted to be like. But what stood out to me most, that he had 2 children, a daughter and a son. And to listen how they talked about him, right? That in one moment there was a guy that he was mentoring, and this guy says he calls Clarence and he says to Clarence, "Hey man, I'm thinking about getting a divorce." And this guy is believing or assuming that as he's talking to Clarence, Clarence is going to say to him, "Yeah, man, I know what you mean. I know what that struggle is like." But that's not what he gets for Clarence. He says that Clarence gets irate, and he just goes in on this guy saying, "Man, you're supposed to be different. You're not supposed to be like these other guys. What in the world are you thinking? Why would you even think about that?" And he gets upset and says, "Man, I'm hanging up." And he hangs up on him. And in his mind, and I don't believe Clarence is a believer, but Clarence valued marriage and fatherhood. And he understood how important that was. People wanted to emulate this guy. People paid attention to him. They watched him. And it seemed that he was somebody to behold. And initially I found myself going in that direction of thinking, yes, this is perfect. That's a great example. Why? Because Jesus is someone to behold. Because when we're right here at the beginning of chapter 17 in Matthew, it's talking about the transfiguration, and it's immediately talking about how Jesus is someone to behold. That he's on the mountain with Elijah and Moses, and he has his core group, his small group of disciples. We would call it your DNA group here at the movement. And he's got his 3 guys with him, and they get to see Jesus. I mean, like the curtain gets pulled back, and they get to see Jesus for exactly who he is. I mean, he's shining bright like a diamond. And it's not just about who Jesus knows, but it's about who knows Jesus. And Moses and Elijah, they know him. They're there on the mountain with him. It's kind of what it talks about in 2 Corinthians 3:18, where it says, "We all, with unveiled faces, are looking as in a mirror at the glory of the Lord, and are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory. This is from the Lord, who is the Spirit." I mean, they're watching Jesus be transformed right there. And what we get to see is the more we behold Christ, the more we become like him. The more we get to see him for everything he is, the more we strive to be like him. The more we fix our attention and our affections on him, the more our lives are changed, and we begin to resemble him. So they're not just seeing Jesus in one form, but they're seeing Jesus in all of his glory. So listen, our goal, even as we're reading through the Gospel of Matthew, as we're reading scriptures, is that we would behold the Lord Jesus Christ. And I believe we as fathers desperately need to behold Jesus. We need to see him for who he really is. if nothing else has convinced you up until this point that Jesus is King, I would hope that this picture of him in this transfiguration, as you read here, would help you see him as being this amazing, being awesome. Matthew 17 in particular gives us one of the most exhilarating and awe-inspiring and worship-invoking portraits of who Jesus is. We get an amazing picture of who he is in this gospel right here in chapter 17. Listen to me, and I'm gonna say this to my fathers. Our encounter with Christ should mean something different. It should mean that we're never, ever the same. And so it shifts for me that right as I get down to verse 14, today we're going to just focus on verses 14 through 20. And what we see is Jesus healing a boy with a demon. Jesus is healing a boy, and he has a legitimate issue. As Jesus and his disciples, they're coming down from the mountain of transfiguration, there's this huge crowd waiting on him. And I'm sure this is normal. This has gotten to be pretty normal for Jesus and the disciples, that always there's crowds waiting. Jesus is like a superstar. And there are always crowds waiting from him. And as they're coming down from the mountain, there's a crowd waiting, but their eyes zoom in on this man coming out of the crowd. Look with me. Chapter 17, verse 14, and I want to read. This is what it says. It says, "And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, 'Lord, have mercy on my son. For he is an epileptic and he suffers terribly,'" meaning he has seizures. "For often he falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples and they could not heal him." And Jesus answered, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me." And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." And this is what I want us to get this morning, fathers, that there is nothing with faith that is impossible for God. There's nothing impossible. So what we see here, we have this father, right? And let me help you. Fathers as a species, right? We don't usually beg and plead. And we especially don't beg and plead another man. Listen, we just got something in us that don't allow us to do that. And let me tell you what that is. It's called pride, right? We got pride in us that we just don't find ourselves doing that, right? If you come from where I come from, you come from the neighborhood I come from, it's definitely not in me. Like I have to work intentionally to find myself being humble, right? And I get it, because it becomes like this standoff, right? Where it's like, man, I'm a man, you a man. I put my pants on just like you put your pants on. And we especially won't find ourselves doing that in public. What we read is this man comes and gets on his knees before this other man and begins to beg him. But here's the kicker. It's not just that he comes before this other man on his knees and begs him, but he does it for and in front of his son. Now listen, it's something in us, right? It's a few people in our life that we don't want to see us get punked in front of, right? I can name 3. Number 1, your mama. You do not want somebody to punk you in front of your mama, right? Number 2, your girl or your wife. You can't be a punk in front of your girl or your wife, right? And then lastly, your son. That you do not want your son to see you beg. And this man with his son falls on his knees in front of this other man. The older your boys get, the less you want to look weak in front of them. Yet, we see this father here, and let me help you. He's a good father. This is a good father in front of us. And he needed to be brought low. Why? Because he's in need. He's acknowledging that I am in need. I need help. And verse 15 tells us he prays this prayer people often pray when they're coming to Jesus. And he prays, Lord, have mercy on me. I believe Psalms 123 verse 2 kind of captures somewhat of what this man's heart is before us. And I want you to hear me. You don't have to turn there, but I want to read it for you. It says, behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hands of their master, as the eyes of a maidservant to the hands of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God till he has mercy on us. The person who prays, Lord, have mercy on me, is dependent on the mercy. It's like a slave being dependent on his master for provision. He says, I'm longing for your mercy. This is how this father comes to this other man, Jesus. And he comes appealing on the behalf of his son. His son is suffering greatly, and he comes to intercede, not for himself, but for his son. How many of you fathers are standing in the gap for your children? Let me go a step further. How many of you fathers are standing in the gap and interceding for your sons? Right? That you are standing in place of, stepping up in front of your son. It makes me immediately think about a movie. I think it's a 90s movie called South Central. Right? And there's this guy, he's in this gang, and he makes a decision so that they can progress in his neighborhood to take out this local drug dealer. And I remember he has like this 357 that he puts a potato on the barrel of the 357 and he kills this guy. And as a result, he goes to jail for killing this guy while having a girlfriend and a baby boy at home. And he does time not really seeing his son as much, and he gets out. But he gets out with a new perspective on life, a new mind, because he is enlightened while in prison. But over this period of time, his running buddy that they were in this gang together has now become who that guy he kills was. Now he is the king of the streets in the neighborhood. And this guy who used to be his right-hand guy, they were buddies, they were pals, they were best friends in the gangbanging, has now begun to recruit his son to be in the same life. And his only mindset when getting out of prison was, I need to save my son. While working for the guy that he used to run with, his son gets shot in the back. Right? And the whole thing is about his son retaliating, and this gang retaliating against this guy who shot his son in the back. But this father is saying, listen, this is not the way. And there's this scene at the very end of the movie where he comes to get his son. And he has no weapon, he has nothing, and the muscle, the bodyguard is banging on him. And he's getting up. Hey, listen, I just came to get my son. You cannot have my son. You will not get my son. And he was willing to die to say, listen, you can't. And there's a moment where he pulls the gun and he stands in front and says, listen, you may have to take me out, but you can't have my son. How many of us as fathers have abdicated that role and handed it over to mothers, and they're having to do the job of protecting sons that you should be protecting? So the Bible tells us in verse 15 that his son has these seizures and he is suffering greatly because of them. He is suffering terribly. It says that he often, listen, take note to this truth, that he often falls into the fire and into water. And listen, taking care of this son would have been a full-time job. But you're always having to be attentive. You're always having to watch. There are no breaks that you can take. The family gets no breaks in taking care of this son. And the father is watching his son be destroyed. It had to be tough. It had to be tough for this father to watch his son suffer day after day. My middle son, CJ, he had an issue, and he's a big kid. But he had a medical issue and he had some stuff going on with him. And we were just unaware of what was happening. And we took him to the doctor, and the doctor pretty much said, hey, he's fine. He's going to be okay. Just let him rest, and gave him some medicine. And we thought, man, everything was going to be okay. But he still continued to experience pain, and we were on vacation, and we were just trying to figure out what was going on. And me and my wife was just kind of at a loss for what do we do? And unfortunately, his situation began to get worse. And it was one of those situations that would threaten his chances of having his own children one day. And only to get back home, and it's still worse. So we man, we got to take him back to the doctor again. And only to find out that some way he was misdiagnosed when we were last at the hospital. And the doctor comes back with this news that I'm not quite happy about. And it shocked me to hear what she had to say, and not to mention me having to say to my son, hey man, you're going to need surgery on this particular thing. And in my mind and in my wife's mind, all I'm thinking to myself is, I failed my son. That I should have been the one protecting him, and I allowed him to get to this space. And I can only imagine that this father is in a similar situation, that his son is suffering in this situation and suffering through these seizures, and he is present, he is there, but there is nothing he can do. If you go over to Mark, the next gospel, it talks about the fact that the crowd thought the boy was dead, that he looked like death. Can you imagine how completely worn out this father would have been? Can you imagine the burns on the body of this boy because he kept falling into the fire? And you can only imagine what other people are thinking, and they're looking at him as like, man, look, they're not taking care of that boy. Look, he got all those burns on his body. And people always got something to say when they're on the outside looking in. And this father is struggling. He is completely broken down. He's worked to the bone. Never a minute of him for himself, because his son, he loves his son. But his son is desperately in need of him. His son desperately needs him to be present, desperately needs him to press in, desperately needs him to fight for him. Our community is struggling. Why? Because we don't have fathers fighting for their families. We don't have fathers fighting for their children. Listen, let me help you. Yes, we are dealing with systematic racism and systematic oppression and so many things in this society. And let me help you. A lot of that has played a role in our fathers being absent. That unjust incarceration and so many different things have broken apart and broken down African American homes. And the reason I am specifying African American homes, because I am African American. But listen, my dad didn't go to jail. My dad wasn't in the streets. He just chose one day that he no longer wanted to be married. And as a result, he got up and left. And he just didn't leave my mom. He found a way to leave his sons. Listen, there's no excuse for that. Let's say possibly you're in this space where you say, I no longer want to be with this woman. But those children, that's not on them. That's not on them. You have no right to decide, I'm no longer going to be fathers to my children. You birthed them. But that's not what we see here. Let me pause for a second. You ever notice how Jesus never rejects anyone, right, that cries out to him for mercy? But the crazy thing is, you ever notice how serious the needs are of the people that come to Jesus? They don't come with paper cuts. They don't come with minor headaches. These people are coming maimed. They come in limping, broken, tortured by demons. These people are convulsing with seizures. They're burned and charred. There are huge things that they're bringing to Jesus. But Jesus never rejects anyone that calls out to him for mercy. There's no problem, no need too great for his mercy. His mercy always suffices. That's what he's like. He doesn't crush the broken. He doesn't stomp out those that are weak. Listen, black men, we have to be more like Jesus. We have to recognize that our communities, that our families are crying out for us to stand up. What we recognize here in verse 16 is that this father, he brings his issue to the disciples. But it seems that the disciples can't help him. He's looking for help that they were unable to provide. If we go back to Matthew chapter 10, verses 7 and 8, you will see that Jesus gives his disciples a power on this short-term mission trip to cast out demons and to heal disease. So maybe for some, they've gotten to the space to believe that, then the disciples must be able to do what Jesus can do. But they couldn't. They weren't able to do. And perhaps now this man begins to think, because the disciples couldn't do it, that maybe Jesus can't help. Maybe there's some doubt in his mind. Maybe there's some doubt in his heart that Jesus can't help his son either. Do you recognize that thinking? That people believe, hey, if Pastor Corey can't help me, then Jesus must not be able to help me either. If these people that call themselves Christians, if these Christians can't help me, then why should I believe that Jesus can help me too? But listen, here's the truth here for you to understand and to learn. See, here's the truth that I want you to get. See, the disciples, they ain't Jesus. Excuse my incorrect English. They ain't Jesus. Let me take it a step further. Let me help you. I ain't Jesus. And any believer or Christian you may know, let me help you. They aren't Jesus. Fathers, we need Jesus. All too often, in our pride, we say, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to handle this. And we fail to humble ourselves to a man greater than ourselves. To be all that we need to be all that we can be, we need this Jesus. And what we see is this father is on his knees and he's pleading with Jesus. And Jesus responds, right? He responds in a striking way. First, there is a rebuke. He says, "Oh, fatherless and twisted generation." Then there are two rhetorical questions. He says, "How long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you?" It's like, how long? Then there are these instructions and there is a healing. Why? Because he says, "Bring him here to me." And the Bible says that Jesus rebuked the demon and it came out of the boy and he was healed instantly. The demon comes out and the boy is healed instantly. In just a moment, with but a word, Jesus demonstrates his authority over all of life. Demons and bodies and anything else in creation, he is ruler of it all. He rules it all. He is making it clear he is king again in this situation. And what happens? He gives mercy to those that seek it. In our pride, we fail to seek help. In our pride as men, we just going to figure it out. And let me give two lessons. One, man, we got to seek out help. We can't sit in our pride and decide, hey, I'm just going to figure this out. My father-in-law, Mark Campbell, smart guy, really smart guy. Retired military, spent a lot of, he's a really smart guy, right? And a good guy. But early on in my relationship with my wife, he's just one of those dudes that has this kind of stoic, kind of tough guy type of thing, right? He is my wife's stepfather. And he's different from my wife's biological father. He's a military man. So, when I first come in, he just like, that's just who he is, right? But he also has this kind of demeanor where it's like, you need to figure that thing out, right? You need to figure it out. So early on in our marriage, I made a ton of mistakes, right? Ton of mistakes. I'm still making some. And there would be moments where I know that him and my mother-in-law would be talking, and I'm sure they would be thinking, what in the world is this boy doing, right? And in moments I would think, if you feel that way, sir, just help me, right? But in my pride, I also wasn't willing to go, let me call him and get some help. So I understand that at this point, through maturity and growth, when you need it, you got to call. But let me say to my older men that in moments, don't stand aside and just go, well, he just gonna mess that situation up. Take that as an opportunity to say, I need to reach out to this young man. I need to make sure that he makes it. I need to make sure that he figures this out. Now, to my father-in-law's credit, listen, he does some amazing stuff serving young men in San Antonio, Texas. That he's a mentor, that he is a person that a lot of young men get to look up to. And he's done some amazing things, putting together curriculum and putting together programs to help serve young men. And at the moment, I'm sure I was a knucklehead. He was like, I don't know what this boy is doing. But I'm grateful for where I am today, and I'm sure he is too. Why? Because I'm married to his daughter. I'm saying to my older gentlemen, you got to begin to invest in and pour into these young men. And young men, you can't be too prideful to ask for or receive help. Because what we see here is this man humbling himself. So what happens? Many of us as fathers are in need of mercy. We're in need of God's mercy. Though we may not want to admit it, though we may not want to be truthful with ourselves, we desperately are in need of Jesus to have mercy on us. I believe all fathers need mercy, but especially black fathers. We up against a lot. And when you got to teach your son how to interact, right? Teach your son when it comes. That's a conversation that black fathers have to have and say, listen, son, when you encounter police officers, this is how you need to act. This is how you need to conduct yourself. Why? Because I need you to come home. I need you to make sure you make it. And whenever our children have encounters with police officers, we're concerned. I remember me and my wife were in California. Never forget it. We're on a trip, and my mother-in-law calls me in the middle of the conference, and she's like, no. My son calls me first in the middle of the trip, and he says, Dad, if you know my son, that's how he thought, Dad, hey, I had an accident in your car. All right? My son is 16 today, but when I got that phone call, he was not 16. Not only was he not 16, but my son had never driven a car in his life. So you got to understand, I'm a little taken back by the fact that he is saying to me, I had an accident in your car. Because my thought is, why are you in my car? So I'm lost, right? I'm like, what? You're kidding me. He's freaking out right now if he's watching this, knowing that I'm talking about this story. And so he hands the phone to my mother-in-law. She was watching the kids for us while we were out of town. And my mother-in-law is hysterical. Right? She's hysterical. And she's going on about, CJ took the car and telling me this. But what she is most hysterical about is the fact that the police officers have my son sitting on the curb and they're talking about arresting him and taking him to jail. My son has the bright idea that he wants to work out. He plays football and he wants to go work out with his friends, and he allows one of his friends to talk him into the idea of, hey, drive your dad's car over here to me, and since I can drive, I'll drive it. He makes it fairly far. But on trying to make a left turn, I guess he holds the wheel a little too much and he runs straight through a gate. And now he's stuck in the gate. So he calls his buddy and says, hey man, come help me get the car out of the gate. Right? They don't understand that now this is an accident scene and the police need to be called. His buddy shows up, they get the car out the gate and not go home. They keep going to try to go work out. Somebody pray for me. Somebody pray for me. But somebody sees them, calls the police. The police catches up to my son and his friends, right? So at this point, my son is in the back seat, I'm assuming. His friend is driving. Police pull him over. His friends decide, I don't want to be in the driver's seat, so he jumps in the back seat as well. So we got nobody in the driver's seat, 2 guys in the back seat, and 1 guy in the passenger seat. Now, these are all football boys. So my son is 215 pounds. He's 16, but he's 215 pounds, a big kid. And he decides that he's going to leave the house with just shorts, no shirt on, and slides, right? He has long dreadlocks. He looks like a man. Let me help you. And all I'm thinking to myself is, man, what if they see my son as just some thug from the community? Let me help you. You know, that's the new N-word today. Thug, that's the new N-word they use. Whenever you get that thrown out in the media, they just replace the N-word with thug. And I'm like, man. And my mother-in-law is hysterical, right? And I'm saying, listen, Mom, listen, let me speak to the chief of police. Let me speak to him. I know him, right? And he's telling my mother-in-law, no, I don't want to speak to him. We taking this into jail, you know. And I say, Mom, listen, go back to him. Tell him who I am. I want to speak to him. This is why it's important that we are invested in our communities and we know people in our communities. And eventually he takes her on from my mother-in-law and I say, listen, he is the chief of police there in Florida City. And he's been that chief for a very long time, right? And I say to him, I say, Chief, listen, this is Corey, pastor of the church, called a movement. Hey, me and you've talked a bunch of times, you know, you used to come on the park. And the very son that you got sitting on the curb right now, you know, you've had several conversations with him about stuff he needs to do and how he needs to work out and that sort of thing. I was like, hey, listen, he's made a mistake, but he's a good kid, right? Can you show him some grace? Dumb move, I agree, but can you show my son some grace? And my mother-in-law gets back on the phone and says, hey, the whole tone changes. Right? But I'm concerned about my son. That he may not know how to interact in these situations. And you know what? Somebody kills him because they're afraid of him. This is why it's so necessary for we as black men especially to be involved in the lives of our children. And in this passage, we see a father who is involved. We see a father who is faithful. We see a father who is concerned with this and says, I need Jesus. Let me help you. You need Jesus. We have to stop sending our women to go fall at the feet of Jesus. That we have to be the ones to go instead and say, listen, Father, please, on the behalf of my children, on the behalf of my family, have mercy on us. Stop deciding, hey, you go ahead and go. I'll catch you later. I'll be here when you get back. That it should be you leading your families to the foot of the cross. Stop sending your women to do a man's job. Humble yourself and beg for His mercy. Now, if you're sitting and you listen to this, talking about, I ain't begging no man, then you don't love your family like you may say you do. If you're allowing your wife to just go, you going over there to that service and listen to some other man talk, and you're not leading them, you don't love them like you may think you do. But here's where we have the issue, right? There's where Jesus, he responds to this guy, he heals this man, but Jesus has got an issue. And the issue Jesus has here is the issue of unbelief. faithlessness and unbelief brings a striking rebuke from Jesus. In God, all things are possible, but all too often that we spend more time as men trusting ourselves than trusting the creator of the earth. Trusting your creator. Instead of your son seeing you be tough and being manly by worldly standards, he needs to see your strength and your faith in the midst of weakness. He needs to see contrition. He needs to see you bowing and begging on his behalf. Because that's strength. God is not pleased with unbelief. The Bible tells us that without faith, it is impossible to please God. And Jesus is addressing his disciples with stinging words of displeasure, and it's shown in these questions in verse 17. They drive home his displeasure. He is heading to the cross. Jesus is weary. He's about to die. And he's asking these questions like, how long? How long do I got to do this with you? How long do I got to put up with you? All through my community, we run into men that don't get it. These disciples, they don't get it. And it's making Jesus weary because they don't get it. He's trying to help them get it and they don't get it. We have husbands that don't get it. We got boyfriends that don't get it. We got sons, we got uncles that don't get it. And it's disheartening as a man to see other men and we go, you don't get it. That often my own father, I'm having these conversations with my brother and I'm like, that dude, he just don't get it. And he calls with these particular requests and think we're supposed to respond to these particular requests and there is no relationship. You don't get it. Jesus is weary and he says to them, how long shall I stay with you? I'm teaching. I'm doing miracles. I'm showing you, and you still don't get it. And he goes back, he says, how long? What are you doing? Right? What are you going to do when I'm gone? What are you going to do when I'm not here with you? Then he asked them, how long do I put up with you? How much patience should I show you? How much patience should Jesus be showing you as a man? How much time do you think you deserve from Jesus? How long will Jesus put up with sinners? How long is he going to put up with the unbeliever, with the faithless? How long? How long will Jesus put up with the fathers that abdicate their roles, the fathers that mistreat their wives, the fathers that mistreat their families and run out on them? How long? How long does he put up with the fathers that won't be fathers to their children? How long? Listen, Jesus is coming back. And he's going to deal with the sinners and the unbelievers and the deniers of who he is. Judgment is coming. It's coming. And my question to you is, how long will Jesus put up with you? How long will he put up with your mess? Can I invite you to think seriously about your life? Just for a moment. My men, think seriously about your life. Do you live in unbelief as it concerns Jesus? And before you answer that, let me help you, because there's often, see, that you may say, no, I believe in Jesus, right? But you don't quite what I would call bear witness. You don't act like you actually believe he's who he say he is. So you may say I do, but your actions don't actually add up to what you say you believe. So my question is, do you live in unbelief as it concerns Jesus? Is he an afterthought? Is he like that extra you may need when things get bad? Is he on hold, right? Do you have commitment issues? You know how some of you men, you leave the woman hanging because you're just not sure if you want to commit? You're just not sure if you want to be all the way bought in because you selfishly are just thinking about you? Right? Is that where you are? Jesus is kind of on hold and you like, yo, Jesus, I'll get with you in a minute. Do you assume life for you can go on endlessly with Jesus continuously to be patient with you? You got to believe that's going to come to an end at some point, right? You got to believe it's not going to just keep going on. Let me help you. God's grace is real. But let me also help you. You are experiencing that grace right now. If you're still breathing, if you can still hear me and see me, you are experiencing his grace right now. But the question is, how long? How long will you experience that grace? Let me help you. Life is like a vapor. It doesn't last forever. We don't have as long as we may think we have. Eventually, it's going to come to an end. And that end is going to come quicker than you believe it will. So my question is, as Jesus will sit on the judgment seat, what does he say to you? If you appear before him on the day and you're unbelieving and you're perverse in your thinking, let me help you. He's no longer going to put up with you. That mother that keeps putting up with you, that wife or that girlfriend or that significant other, that baby mama that keeps putting up with you. How long? Listen, I implore you. I beg you. If it wouldn't take me off the camera, I'd get on my knees and I would beg you, as men, give your life to Jesus. Give your life to him. Because he's the only one that can help you be who you need to be. And to respond as this father would respond, begging and pleading that God would show him and his son mercy. The Bible says his judgment will come like a thief in the night. Quick. As instant as that boy was healed, that's how instant he'll show up. Fathers, respond today to his grace. Your families, they need you. Your sons, they need you. Listen, we can't do anything about what the past was. You can't change it. But what you can change is what you do today. How you respond today. And on the behalf of your sons and your family, I would implore you, get on your knees now and beg the Lord for mercy. Humble yourself. Listen, I am who I am and I'm a better man, not because of me. And I'm not perfect. Ooh, I've made a bunch of mistakes. But that right now, we just need you to be present. Your families, your community need you to be present. And the only way you can be even remotely close to what you need to be is placing your faith and hope in Jesus. And getting on your knees before him, humbling yourself and say, I need you. I'm telling you, you're never going to be anything close to what you need to be aside from him. Period. And with all that's going on in the world today, we need more godly men standing for truth, standing for our families, saying, I need you. Right? I love my father-in-law, Robert. And he does not have a picture-perfect past. But what I know, that man loves his family. We need men that express and show their love for their families on their knees, pleading for mercy. That our goal here at the movement is that we believe family is important. And we want to see men progress and grow, right? To be who they need to be. And I'm not talking about perfect men. Listen, this church is full of men who struggle forward through things. As my man Omar often say, we fall forward. But we're often employing and pushing and pleading that men would stand up. And that my passion is to see a church that is filled maybe with more men than there are women, that are standing in the gap and standing on the behalf. Listen, stop being complacent and being happy with where you are. We got way too many men that are just bums. You're a bum. You're living off someone else. You're not making a way. You're not standing in the gap. You have nothing of your own. That doesn't change communities. Let me help you. Any community you go in any place around this world where fathers are absent, that community is struggling and suffering and poor. When men are present, that community does well and does different. And you can go see that anywhere you want to go. And there is no slight against mothers. Listen, we are naturally people that want to fix it. And when we can't, we struggle. This father struggled because he couldn't fix it. But let me help you who can fix it. Jesus fixes things. Fix me. And I'm not perfect. Let me help you. He could do the same for you. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you are a great, great Father. Oh, you are the best father ever. Better than Clarence Avant, better than anybody I've ever known, better than all of my fathers and father-in-laws. You are an amazing Father. And I believe you are everything you say you are. Even in the moments where I struggle and my life doesn't actually line up with that, I just want to pray for our fathers in this community. I want to pray for the fathers that have been standoffish, those fathers that will not refuse to believe you are who you say you are. Those fathers that send their wives off to go hear maybe a guy like me speak and not be the one leading out. Those fathers that send their wives and girlfriends and significant others to the foot of the cross and they won't actually come themselves. I pray for boldness. I pray for humility. I pray for grace in their lives. That even in my head right now, I think about men that have been a part of this ministry or have come at some point, and the stories that I've heard and the things that we're struggling with, those that just refuse to hear out their wives and to hear their heartbeats. And I know that struggle because I've been one of those husbands. That you would help us, that you would help them even now to be vulnerable, to open up, to allow you to begin to just work in their hearts. I pray for ambition. I pray for dreams and hopes. I pray for those men that have watched their dreams and hopes be dashed. I pray for those men that have been incarcerated and they come out and it seems that there's nothing out here for them. I pray for those men that have struggled to see their children because they have confrontation with the children's mother, and they're trying and they're pushing and they struggle in that area. I pray for reconciliation and peace. And I pray for a better day in our communities. I pray for less men at the corner and at the liquor store and more men at the PTA meeting. More men at the basketball game, more men at the football game, more men at the practices bringing their kids to practice, more men coaching teams in the community, more men starting things to serve these young men and women in this community. I pray for change and transformation. I pray for more mentors. I pray for more older men to pour into younger men. I pray for more fathers to be returned back to their sons. I pray for more fathers that will be willing to apologize for their absence and not make up for the old time, but to do something different for the new time. Pray for reconciliation for father-in-laws and son-in-laws. Pray for peace. I pray to see you move in this ministry, in this church, and that more men would come, more men would gather to be of support to one another. I pray for contrition. I pray for broken hearts. I pray for sorrow. I pray for repentance. In Jesus' name. Lord, Father, happy Father's Day to you. Thank you for your grace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Information will be on the bottom of the screen. If you got any questions or you need to reach out to someone, or if you want to give to the work that is happening right here in West Homestead, please do so through the links down below. God bless you guys. For more information, please go check out the website, www.moveccc.org. God bless you guys. And to my men, to my fathers, happy Father's Day.